Imagine a cosmic race through time where one stubborn teenager must rewrite centuries of human cruelty and choice to stop a single act of hatred from ending the world before it begins. I'm Space Admiral Kandas.
I'm Space Cadet Shane, second class.
We are wrapping up Madeleine L'Engle's Time Quintet with A Swiftly Tilting Planet, joined once again by visiting dignitary Valerie Friedlander, who helps us untangle time travel, moral responsibility, and why a single choice can still wreck everything. Welcome, Valerie.
Thank you for having me yet again.
So, there are 5 books in this quintet, and we're going to wrap it up with this one. Why is A Swiftly Tilting Planet a good place for us to end this series of conversations?
Well, because it's the last one that really focuses in on Meg and Charles Wallace. The other 2 follow the twins. And so while they're part of the same family very closely, it makes sense to wrap up here because of that.
This book is about the threat of nuclear war. I grew up in the I was a child in elementary school in the 1970s, and nuclear bomb drills were part of our thing. We would get under the table and we'd hide whenever the alarm went off. And so because this was written in the time frame where I was a child, this book really hit home for me. I don't know about you, Shane. How do you feel about it?
That was a scary boogeyman at the time, and it still is. But yeah, I remember the drills, and well, you're in the Midwest, so drills of tornadoes, drills of thunderstorms, drills of whatever. But it was always the same drills that basically you go hide underneath your desk or basically in the hallways against the lockers. That's how it was.
The thing that was interesting to me is that the author, Madeleine L'Engle, chose not to make the big bad enemy the obvious choice, which would have been Russia in the 1970s. She picked a country in South America. Even though this book was written almost 50 years ago, maybe it was written 50 years ago, it still feels so relevant. So talk about that, Valerie, from a sociologist's point of view.
It has been a while since I read this book, and I will say this was the book that I was thinking of when I originally was like, hey, let's chat. Not because it's my favorite, but because I was thinking about that idea of healing generationally. There's a lot of talk about being a good ancestor, and I was thinking about as a sci-fi nerd and time travel, and I forget what it was that sparked this idea, but it was like, could you be a good descendant? Like, what does it mean to be a good descendant? So, like, could you heal backwards? Like, what if time wasn't linear? So this isn't a sociological approach. This is really the science fiction nerd approach of like, what does it look like to heal in, like, if time wasn't linear? Like, we have to think forward. Like, we understand backward, but we live forward.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's so much about science fiction that's like very much projecting these ideas. I feel like we're living in a sci-fi novel. Like, I feel like so many, like the Hunger Games is coming up, or the Patriot Games. Like, we've got just so many pieces, like AI, like all of these pieces are coming into play. It's like, did we just write ourselves into the future? Is that what happened? Like, are the people in charge reading the books and going, yeah, that sounds like a great idea? And I'm going, why would you think that was a great idea? It didn't go very well.
Sometimes you wonder if authors are predicting the future or if scientists and engineers are using science fiction to create what they create.
Yeah. Well, I think it's both in some ways, right? Like, I think when you look at the patterns of people and how we interact with one another, then you can predict the future. If we don't change the way we're behaving now in its basic forms, in the next circumstances, this is how we're going to behave. And there are certain things where I think, you see the science fiction project ideas of what science will be like. Right. And I think that does inspire some people who are more scientifically minded to be like, could we do that? You see that with all the commentary about like, well, how possible are the things in Star Trek? Right? Could we actually create a transporter? Like, what does that look like? So could we do this? Is this possible? What I like about the time travel idea is there is the aspect of, could we time travel? But then there's the moral conversation. And the logistical conversation of what happens if we do that? If you change the butterfly effect, right? Like if you change one thing, what do you change? And that was the interesting question. And there's so many ideas. The Tesseract. How do we understand time? Does it create multiverses if we change things? Or does it just erase things? What happens? What is time?
Yeah.
We have such a curiosity around that.
Time is a wibbly wobbly kind of thing.
In this book, L'Engle chose to make the time travel erase the things that happened
Yes.
between. I mean, it was just an erasure. If we erase this from time, that means that people will never be born.
If you change one thing, and that's the issue that I have with that approach. I mean, everybody always has an issue with when you deal with time, somebody is going to be like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Because if you change one thing, so many other things change. Because that one thing, we make so many decisions
Right.
over the course of time. Like, it could not possibly just change one thing.
Yeah.
Time is like a car accident. If you look for your keys 1 second sooner or later, you would have been in an accident. If you're in a horrible accident and you lose somebody that you love, that's probably going to ring around your head, and that's probably why you need therapy, is because of the second guessing scenario. But what I found, like you mentioned, nuclear time, my mind always looks for references. Okay, previous books, previous history, previous this, that, and the other thing. Science fiction is basically a guesstimation of what the future is going to be or what could it be, kind of thing. And it's taking the environment. So the author is looking at the environment. It's actually taking things from the past, of her own personal past, and also taking things from basically previous things they have read as well. It's almost like basically I go to not Gene Roddenberry, Ray Bradbury a lot, is because when he was writing, he has an extensive. You go on YouTube, whatever, he talks about Fahrenheit 451 a lot. And one of the things he said was that basically most science fiction writers basically write things they don't want to happen. Terminator.
They're cautionary tales in a lot of ways.
Cautionary tales,
yeah.
And the thing is that we keep on, as you said, that we keep on doing it anyway. And that's the reason being is because of human arrogance. So human arrogance is throughout time, right? The reason why that didn't work is because we didn't do it. It's basically saying that you can defy gravity, all right? And what humans really are about is that, no, you can't defy gravity. This will cure every freaking third generation, because the third generation kind of loses it because they don't remember what their grandparents told them. So the further you go down the line, it just regenerates itself again. So if you have this knowledge that humans are going to do this every 30 or 40 or 50 years, depending on the generation gaps, is that you're now going toward Isaac Asimov's foundation of what do you call it? The philosophy he had to create those books.
Oh, psychohistory.
History, which was basically predict the history of the future. And the only thing that really interrupts that pattern is the mule. Or, we're going to get political, Trump, all right? We had a thing going, democracy, yada, 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 and then there's this guy. And so he reminds me a lot of the meal, okay? And if you read that part of his foundation kind of thing, it kind of like connects the dots a little bit. But then again, it's so small a blip, and then it reverts back to basically human history, basically back to, our regular pattern of cycles again. And so
let's bring this back to the book a little bit. So we're talking about a single act of hatred, and the mule that you're talking about sort of centers on that. So if we were to talk about today, is there a single act of hatred that if we could eliminate that single act, it would heal the world today? Do you think that's possible?
In the book, I'm not sure what you're thinking of in terms of a single act of hatred, but what L'Engle frequently references is the brother against brother. The Cain and Abel story is essentially what she's looking at. And so it's the single act is an act that's repeated throughout time. It is when one brother will due to pride, due to greed, wants to take out the other brother. who
Envy.
is seen as a threat. Envy.
Envy.
Yes.
That's what you're looking for.
Envy. Pride, greed, envy, wants
Envy
to take out the other brother. All of the
all the seven deadly sins.
all of the seven deadly sins. And so like she references like brother against brother. And that's the single act that repeats over and over. And it repeats in different scales. You have first the two brothers, and then you have the Civil War. So brothers, two sides, to north south, and then you have the world. Like, oh, I hate this world. Nothing is good. I'm willing. Mad Dog Branzillo is willing to destroy everything to end this cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's an interesting look of like the two perspectives of ending the cycle. There's the just stop doing it. Love each other, like show up and in care. And then there's the, you know what, we're never going to stop it. We should just destroy it and be done with it so that we stop it. And it's the obliteration and the can we actually be better? The thing that disappointed me in this book, reading it again as an adult, was how much she plays in some very, what I always thought of as like the subtle, but the white supremacist concepts. And she's trying not to, but it's very much like white feminist progressive trying, where
dances around it.
She and I don't think I honestly I don't think she meant to. But that doesn't change the fact that she did, where there's a lot of eugenics concepts in the book where she talks a lot about facial features. And then she's talking about the lines, like this line, if this line gets to go forward and dominate, then that line will destroy the world and this line will heal it. And it's very much like and then there's some beautiful, like, okay, reminded me of the history of there's a group of colonists who did integrate with the native people and disappeared. And we don't know what happened to that town. Most likely, the theory is that they integrated with the native people on the land and became one with them. So that sounds like that's part of some of the idea. I don't think it's like, I think she thinks very highly of native people and the belief system. But then as we go along, the people who are the hope are the people who came from New England and the people who came from Wales, not the people who have ancestry from those places, but have been living and intermarrying and procreating with the people in South America. So, like, there's just these little pieces that I was like, you did the thing. and then, of course, the legend of Madoc, which I wasn't as familiar with, that is actually a real legend that was very popular during colonial times to emphasize English rights to the land, which I didn't know that either. So it was like, it sounds kind of beautiful in the book, but then you learn about how it was used. And it's like, that's not so great.
I didn't realize it was a real legend.
Yeah, it is. I didn't either until I started doing research after reading it this time and going, there's kind of sounds like some of the problematic stuff we've been talking about. And for me personally, it hits home because I have Welsh heritage. I have family dating back to colonial times, settling in New England area. And also the folks, they colonized in Ireland first, and then they came and colonized in New England. And like, so I have, and that's actually what started my thinking about, like, could you be a good descendant? Could you heal the wounds of your ancestors, like forward, but also backwards? Is that a thing? Like, if time wasn't linear, could you heal backwards the wounds that led people to do these atrocities? Like, could you do that?
Well, there are energy healers who believe that's true, that you can.
Well, here's a question. You just bring up a question because she did touch on Calvin's mom's or their history.
Yeah.
Of one going to war, coming back defected. And he was looked upon as defective now. And they said, well, you know, you're one. It was one of those things that basically, well, it doesn't look like there's nothing wrong with you anymore, so you should be okay. Okay. And this again, it's an appearance thing. And I think that's where, if you look at several different sci-fi books and sci-fi things, you will always find that basically it's the appearance. See the appearance of the skin. It's the appearance of, oh, he looks fine, or I don't like this person because he's that color or this thing. And then it
Well,
goes
the
to
eyes are given a lot of weight in this
well, yeah,
book.
a
Blue
lot of
eyes.
weight, a lot of weight. Blue
Yeah.
eyes meaning northern, right? And so, you know, if that doesn't satisfy you, you know, you can always go to the religious aspect of it as well. All right. So it's always going to be, what I'm saying is that it's always going to be, all right. The reason why, and it always goes to the personal, all right, like a child, all right. The reason why I don't have this toy is the reason because this is because of that, all right. And, or this or that. And then it goes down even further in that. Then you start to find more excuses for it. And you just bury it. And then before you know it, you know, you really hate that person because of skin or religion. And it goes down to that. And what I'm kind of in my life right now at this point as an artist, and I've said this before, as she's writing the end of these books, she's getting older too. So there's a lot more information, a lot more grace she has in her life, probably, because, you know, you get that way as you get older. That understanding, all right, is more important. In other words, before, if you're a younger person, it's more basically of not understanding, of more of hitting with a hammer. Then after time goes by, you kind of go, well, this hammer ain't working anymore. All right. It doesn't work. It never did work. All right. So you go and move to understanding, and you go to understanding. And then as you understand things, and goes back to science, basically science itself. And I was telling Kandas the other day, Neil deGrasse Tyson, or one of them, said that basically what science is basically facts. And in other words, you can do it in an equation, or you can do the simplest equation or the most complex equation. Every time it comes out with the same answer. So science is the prediction of the future. So in other words, it's a fact. If I take 2 plus 2, I'm going to get 4 every time. Every time. The only reason why that changes is because you put fairy dust on it, or it's a miracle, or it's magic. Somebody has a spell or something. Now, if you mix kindness with that understanding, you become a creator in a sense. So that actually, it's that kindness that we see at the end of the madman, who basically now understands. I mean, there's basically, and if you see science fiction writers, basically, or other things, you'll see that basically it's understanding, and then they're basically the manipulating of that understanding, and then the kindness that there follows. Now we have a problem with basically is that kindness never follows for some people. They see power in that manipulation, and goes to the second definition. All right. And that's a different well altogether kind of thing. So we always have this good versus evil kind of thing. That human pattern of basically we're always going to have one teepee wanting the other teepee.
So this good versus evil, let's explore this, because healing generationally backwards, and the good versus evil, I think they go hand in hand.
So it's interesting because, you know, so at the end of the book, you actually have a different person. The guy at the end is not the same person. He's genetically different. He's a different descendant than the person that we started with. And that's something that I feel like I had forgotten that, for one. I didn't actually see healing happen for the descendant. It was a manipulation of who procreated is what happens in this book. It wasn't an understanding that happened or an expansion of empathy. Charles Wallace is the one who has that journey. And I think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
In whole thing, like, so often Gaudior is asking, like, well, what is real? Because Charles will be like, was that real? And Gaudior will be like, well, what is real? And so in some ways it takes it out of the, like, this has to make sense logically, or it has to be, I feel like it's weaker because it's different people and different breeding. Again, that's why I brought up the idea of that there may have been some influence of the eugenicist theories in play with this, which I think weakens the overall book. But what Charles is learning is about control. There's a key point where he realizes my ego keeps stepping in and saying, I know what's bad. I can use my intellect, and I'm so smart that I know best, and I can manipulate this situation because I now know, because of these things, that we need to go here and we need to do this. And that's when the ecthoi come in, is all of those decisions where he's trying to control what happens instead of just being with it, being within it, as it were. He has this gift of empathy, essentially. He has a gift to go within, to really walk in the shoes of another human being. But then his ego takes over and he's like, well, because I walked in your shoes. That it's exactly what you're saying, Shane, about like these choices of so I know, so I'm going to use my intellect and all of my power of knowledge to control this situation, instead of I'm going to go in and I'm going to care and I'm going to be with this person and I'm going to experience them and I'm going to understand them and I'm going to have compassion for them. And even when he does that, when he actually is effectively able to do that and he's with those people, nothing changes for them. They still go through their pain. They still have the trauma happen to them, the accident, the hurt, the loss, but he cares. They're not just a means to an end anymore. They are a whole person who he cares about. And that's something that Meg goes through too with her mother-in-law, where she just sees her as this like really awful woman who just doesn't care about her children at all. And they talk about, and I think this is to the point that Shane's made before about the times that one lives in. There's a lot of commentary around women's experience in this book, where she had to do this to
during the 70s, they were really pushing the Now movement, which never came to fruition, but it was a very
So that's the idea of like, oh, I see you now. Now I know why you made that decision. And I care about who you are, even though you made this decision that was harmful to my husband. I see you and your pain, and I care about that. And I think more than what happens at the end, that they stop the nuclear war and all of that sort of stuff, more than that, that's what this book is really supposed to be about.
The nuclear war, if you think about it, basically at that time, and even now, but is like, that's it, we're done. I mean, the atrocities, what would happen, and so on is so horrific, all right? We dropped 2 bombs and that was it for us. That was it for the world at that time. Now we're getting to another cycle, basically like, well, like, I guess maybe it wasn't too bad. Maybe we're just going to use some little ones. The thing is that for us, as we go through this whole book, and what I'm learning now as I get older, okay, is that she picked the most horrific freaking thing at that time. Okay. She goes back with Charles Wallace on this magical unicorn that does not go to A or B, but stays on a dot, but only goes up and down in time. Couldn't get that through Charles Wallace's head for a couple times until Charles Wallace figured it out, that basically, wait a minute, I'm not going here or there. I'm going up and down, through time here. And what she showed him, or what she wanted him to be in, not as an observer, but a participant, like in a Star Trek episode, is that this redundancy, right, of human behavior, 7 deadly sins and so on. But also the thing is that basically what you do is kind of like a Buddhist thing, right? Don't step on a bug or whatever it is, because you don't like the butterfly effect. You don't have no idea what's going to happen like 500 years from now. That is so important. Because I have found myself, and I said this to a friend of mine a couple months back, is that I am finding myself, because I have the knowledge, or because I have a soothsayer kind of thing, and the only reason I have a soothsayer is because I have more experience than most people about certain things. So I know kind of like what's going to happen before it even happens, just because I have experience in it. But there's times where you just kind of go, it's not so much, and I've read this in a lot of different other books too, older books, 17th, 18th century books, that basically just because you can, you have to think about should you. And that's not just actions, but that's actually knowledge that you possess. So the butterfly effect, or what Charles Wallace was being seen, was not just his time now, or 20 years or 30 years. He was going way the hell back. So in other words, like you said, that problem of the crazy man never erupted came through, because through time it was notching out as it went to the end. So there was really no lesson you learned.
And that's really what Madeleine L'Engle was trying to get to in this book.
Yeah. So it's like a Buddhist thing. Treat everybody like the Buddha, or treat everybody like Jesus, because you don't know. You just don't.
When I was in college, I studied anthropology. I really thought that I would become an anthropologist one day. And one of the tenets that we learned was that we are there to observe culture, not judge or affect. We're there to observe. And that's why time travel that manipulates this way really bothers me, because what are all the butterflies that we are killing that we're supposed to be, that we're supposed to hatch, that we are preventing from
Yeah,
happening?
I mean,
Yeah. Well, that's the idea, though, the multiverse of like and the might have beens, right? They talk about the might have beens.
Yeah.
Which might have beens are the right might have beens? We don't know. And I think there's a line in this book that says, somebody says, well, my grandmother used to say, don't let your morals stop you from doing what's right.
Mm.
And it's really interesting because I'm like, I thought morals were supposed to guide you into what is right. But I think the idea is that, at least for me, I think of if you're really listening, if you're really paying attention, all of those preconceived notions of what is or how things are supposed to be or whatnot, if you're actually listening and present, you might realize that some of those aren't actually right.
Mhm.
Some people have really strong belief. It's the difference between dogma and truth, right? And that idea, what Shane's talking about, of the thinking that, like, well, because I have all of this experience, then I know what's going to happen if you do this. But if I tell you, and this is the issue with the science fiction, if I tell you that's what's going to happen, do I make it happen?
Mhm.
Would it have happened if I hadn't told you that was what was going to happen?
Mhm.
Which
Maybe,
brings
but
us
we don't
back
know.
to the Star Trek. Do we have flip phones because of communicators?
Right.
Right.
Right. But
Yeah.
I can tell you this for a fact. Okay. I can tell you this for a fact. And I want to make this very, very, very clear. Kindness is always the right direction. Is always the right direction. It doesn't seem like it's going to be a big deal at the time. It doesn't seem like it's going to affect the future or millions of people or so on. All right. But I have heard more stories about other people my age or so on. And you heard stories on YouTube of actors and famous people. And they go, if this person didn't do this for me, if this person didn't do that for me, didn't hold the door right, didn't do that, didn't give me that extra piece of bread, or this little things, the littlest freaking things.
You have a lot of skepticism about humanity.
I do. I've read a lot of sci-fi and 17th century novels.
Well, it's in the book. It's one of the early on. It talks about the light and the dark dancing together. That's something else that shows up a lot in this book that I've been actually hearing a lot of people talk about now. And then I've seen in her other books, she talks about love, she talks about joy, and she talks about dancing. And this idea, and I think about, like, Jesus was the Lord of the dance, right? What is the dance? And the farandole dance, the stars dance. The unicorn dances with the full, like, it's like this idea of this cosmic dance. Light and dark were neither were bad, neither were good. They danced together until the nothingness cut through it, and the vacuum of nothing, where we want to erase things. And I think that kind of goes back to that idea of Xing, right?
Mhm.
And I think of, even as with a background in improv and acting, the idea of yes and, right? When you're given something, you don't go, no, I'm going to shut that down. You say yes and I'm going to add my own piece to the puzzle. It's recognizing that you're part of something bigger. I think even just there's so many little pieces of being present, being with, right? The idea of communion, being with, whether it's with yourself, with another person, with the universe, with the moment that you're in, with the thing that you're doing, being with. We're so busy in our heads when we think about intellectual, in the future, in the past. We're not with. And when we're with, I think we have the capacity to notice and to be kind. And I do wonder, just philosophically speaking, if we weren't so hurried, if we weren't so busy, if we didn't have the trauma from generations that said we have to control this or we won't be safe, would we be more kind naturally? Because we weren't afraid that we were going to miss something and not get somewhere. It's this building of this hierarchying, this who's better, who's worse, that has been passed down generationally and gone into that place where we don't have words for it anymore. It's just a way that we know to be with each other. And then we naturally just pass it down to our children, this busyness, this future, and wishing we'd done things differently in the past. If we could just be with each other, we might care a little bit more. That's the generational trauma. That's the fear.
Yeah.
And there's so many studies and books that relate to it, because there is a layer of genetics that plays into that, where if you look at, they've done studies about mice and like getting a shock with a particular smell, and then the next generation smells the smell and acts like they've been shocked, and then 7 generations later it's the same, even though they've never had the shock.
Yeah.
The smell evokes the same response. So that idea that it does become encoded in us. And so but that's that idea of, can we heal that? And if we heal that in the moment, does that, I mean, the idea we're nurturing differently, but we're also passing different genetic code down, like, and it's not different genetic code, it's what activates, right? Because those are the studies about, like, it's not necessarily that you're changing genetics. What you're doing is changing what gets activated, on what code gets activated and turned on, like certain situations and all of that. This is not my area of expertise. I just love learning about it. But it's from way back in feudal times, and and then into the Industrial Revolution, and all of these places where people hoarded power, hoarded resources, and kept other people lower than them and in need and scrambling. That's where the idea of race came into play, to keep poor white people from banding with poor Black people and rising up against the people who, like, oh, if we create hierarchies. Resmaa Menakem talks about plantations were not designed, their purpose was to organize white people, ultimately, to keep those hierarchies in place so that the people with the power stayed on the top. Anyway, all of that. So, like, yes, it's all this passing down genetically, in nurturing, in all of these different ways, this fear of, I don't have enough. And in order to have enough, I've got to take you down so that I can have enough. But we don't even know what enough is anymore. There are people, I have worked with people who have relatives who are millionaires, who function in the world like they don't have enough because of that conditioning.
We can see it happening.
Well, you can see it in the book. She even puts it in the book, where basically Calvin's freaking life, or Calvin's is they're poor. In the last book, the teacher had to give him the shoes. Where the Murphys are growing, are pumping out PhDs, and I think even Miss Murphy, not Miss Murphy,
Murray,
Calvin's mom, even, I think there was something in there that mentioned that basically she resented them, or they looked like, at the Murrays, like, you guys think you're better than us, kind of thing. So
that was not the reality. So
no, see, that was the thing, is that as Wallace kept on dying, it wasn't the case. They were a prominent family. It's just they got flat tires.
Yeah.
What everybody gets.
Yeah.
She
was the last of a very prominent family. So, Valerie, it has been a lot of fun dancing with you for these last 3 episodes. I want to make a comment about kindness, and then we need to wrap up. When you are in traffic and somebody cuts you off, inevitably you and that other car arrive at the next stoplight at the same time. So the act of not being kind doesn't get you anywhere any faster. So just choose kindness. Anyway, Valerie, how can people find you?
Well, people can find me on my website, which is valeriefriedlander.com. And then also my podcast, which is called Mindset Unlimited. And it's on all major platforms. And this conversation really reminds me of one particular episode I did, which was about empathy, because there's a lot of conversation right now about empathy and if it's destroying the world or if it's saving us and all that. And so I did an episode about that. So I think that's pretty relevant to this conversation. But those are 2 great places to find me. And then all social platforms at Unlimited Coach Val.
That is a wrap on the Time Quintet by Madeleine L'Engle. We did 3 of the 5 books. Maybe Valerie will come back and we talk about the next 2 books next season. But we are also wrapping up our first season of Sci Fi Book Pod. It's been a lot of fun.
Yay.
Actually finished a season. So thank you, Valerie, for being a huge part of the season. Thank you, Space Cadet Shane, for saying, hey, can I do this with you? Because he literally did say, hey, if you're doing this, I want to do it with you. And I said, okay.
I love it. Congratulations.
Thank
This
you.
has been a lot of fun.
Thank you very much. All right. I've been Space Admiral Kandas.
I'm Space Cadet Shane, second class.
And I'm Valerie
And-
Friedlander.
And you have been listening to Sci Fi Book Pod.
Yay!